My name is Rob Hahne. I am the youth committee chair. I'm also serve on the travel committee under Taylor. I run the Northern Virginia Travel Baseball League up here in Northern Virginia, the Potomac Summer Collegiate League as well.
Jeff, go ahead.
My name is Jeff Petty. Coach the Canes National New York Mets Scout team in the summer. CEO of Canes Baseball, also CEO of Dynamic Baseball, which is a tournament business. General manager of PDG Academy, which is a baseball academy here in Fredericksburg, based out of the Fredericksburg National Stadium. And I also serve for Taylor on the ABCA Travel Committee, and also a owner of a Focus Performance Center, which is a gym where we train athletes here in the area.
Taylor, go ahead.
Taylor McCollough. I am the chair of the Travel Baseball Committee for ABCA, and then also VP Operations for Perfect Game.
Jordan, go
ahead. Jordan Baltimore, founder, CEO, director of research and training in New York Empire Baseball, an organization based here in New York City, facility here in the city. Got 64 of our own teams, about 1,000 ball players come through the place every year, ages, well, now less than 4, but 4 to up all the way up to pro. Serve on both the youth and travel committees.
And, it's been a hot button topic at the big leagues with arm care, and I think travel baseball is getting thrown in with that, I think unfairly. I mean, if you look at Shohei Ohtani, he didn't play in the United States, had 2 arm surgeries, so I don't think you can throw that on youth baseball, but I think this is probably more directed towards Jeff and Jordan on this. How are you guys tracking pitches? Because obviously every tournament is different, but how are you guys tracking pitches for your own individual players?
It's interesting. I'll jump in here. I mean, I'm also a consultant to NYU Langone Sports Orthopedic Performance Center. Look, we this is a year-round thing for us, right? It's not, hey, we're in season, so let's track pitches, right? We're looking at workload all day, every day, whether it's through, Driveline Pulse, or just our own analytics that are going on in here. So we're looking at everyone's workload, and we're really focused on strength and mobility year round. So it's not where we wake up a couple of weeks before the season, on ramp and start throwing. I know Devin Morgan likes to say that there's far more innings in a tournament and far more innings in a season than, a typical travel team can manage. For players outside our organization, we're very, very careful. We build strength and mobility programs and look at mechanics for every individual player. But for a team, our own teams, the goal is to have every player on a team capable of pitching and pitching well, so that nobody's carrying more than their workload, right? The athletic director or head of recruiting at insert school here isn't worried about the win-loss record of 12U travel baseball. He wants to know he's got a healthy horse, great athlete, great worker. So we actually forego wins and losses. And I think it's made for long-term success, but we're less worried about wins and losses than we are individual player development. So you go out and train 12, 13 kids on a team, and they can all pitch, and you've got yourself a recipe for long-term success with lower injury rate.
Hey, Jeff, hold on. Blake, jump in here. Sorry about that. I'll edit you back in the beginning when we do this, because this won't go out to YouTube. This will just be the audio. So, Blake, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Blake Hibler, president of Prep Baseball Report tournaments and bullpen tournaments.
Jeff, go ahead. How are you managing workload?
Yeah, ironically, I sent a text out yesterday to our club this summer just asking for high school statistics. I like to get my hands on, their high school workload. I want to know, do they throw 60 innings in high school? Do they throw 30? Are we going to use them in a starting role? Are we going to use them out of the pen? I think it's hard to manage when you're drawing kids from all over and you don't know what their workload was. But I think 100 innings is the mark for the year for a high school kid, I believe, is healthy. I don't think kids are getting to that number anymore in my research. I think a lot of kids are throwing as low as 50 innings for the year. And then to ask a kid to throw 50 innings in a spring, summer, fall year, and then go to Vanderbilt and be in shape to pitch, 100-plus innings, or let's say they go to professional baseball, that's a lot. It's a big jump. And I think that's where a lot of the arm injuries are coming from personally. I know it's probably not going to be a popular answer, but back in the day, I think kids threw a lot more than they're throwing now. But we don't usually run guys out 5-6 innings. 3-inning periods usually is and then we give the ball to the next guy.
And Alan Jaeger and I have talked about this with the Latin players. They throw a lot more, not off the mound, but they play catch a lot more than the American players do. And you don't see as many injuries on the Latin side as the American side, because I think they do throw more, not off the mound, but they do throw more on the side. Rob, you've had crossover with your Northern Virginia Travel League, with House League, Travel League. How were you managing workload for those players, those pitchers that were doing both your House League and your Travel League?
Yeah, it's as Jeff was talking about earlier, it is challenging, whether it be the tournament environment or the league environment, is communicating amongst coaches and leagues and tourneys and events. Game Changer has certainly helped with that, being able to access real-time information across different leagues. For our younger age groups, they may pitch, in their little league on Saturday, 15 pitches and be available to throw on Sunday according to Pitch Smart rules. I think this is a topic, and I'm excited that Blake is starting our travel rules committee, because I think this is a great topic to discuss further, what we do with that. In our Potomac Collegiate League, we have very strict pitch count rules that start as low as 65 pitches for the first few weeks and then build up. And we do that because we know college pitching coaches want to protect arms. And as Jeff talked about earlier, they want to have fresh arms coming into the fall. It's a short season league, only 22 games. For that very same reason, to manage workloads and things like that. So I do think this is a hot topic, and look forward to diving into it further under Blake's rules subcommittee.
And Blake, over at Grant Park, you have little guys over there, you have the bigger kids going on. What are the better teams that you see over there? How are they managing workload for their arms? Hey, unmute.
It's all over the place. Depending on what the team's goals are, I think everybody has a different opinion of it. Most your higher level teams tend to, they don't want to forfeit winning, but they do forfeit winning for arm safety. We have several of the clubs that forfeit games when they feel like they're out of pitching. And it's kind of an unpopular opinion when the other teams traveled far away, but you understand that that's the right thing to do. Game Changer causes a lot of problems sometimes just because the operator doesn't switch the pitcher. And, we live in the social media world where everybody's kind of called to the table, and they like to call out those guys and really it's just a clerical error, not necessarily a mistake. And I think with the number of resources anymore that are out there, suggested through USA, through Pitch Smart, things like that, and as much attention as it's getting anymore, for someone to ignore arm health, they're kind of naive and probably need to be, kind of removed from the game. And I think they're weeding themselves out just because of our public scrutiny anymore.
You look at the Division I season, if you play into the World Series, it's about 19 weeks, and you're going to look at the top end of that. It's going to be about 120, 130 innings top, and that's somebody that goes for 19 weeks. So if you do the math on that, you're talking about 6 to 7 maybe innings tops. Brett Sears is a good example, kid that pitched for him at Western Illinois. He's at Nebraska right now, and he's averaging about 6, 7 innings an outing, but he's only going 90 to 100 pitches per outing because he throws a lot of strikes. If you look at his numbers, he's got a ton of strikeouts, not very many walks, so he's not going very many pitches in that 6 to 7 outing. And I think that's where people get confused with it, because innings and pitches tell a completely different story. As far as a kid might throw 5 or 6 innings on a youth side, but he's going to throw 130 pitches. That's a lot compared to a kid that might throw 65 or 70 pitches. That's a way different story on both those sides.
And when I coached Team Indiana, what Jeff talked about with the 100 innings is exactly what we followed. And we just kind of made sure that they were spread out innings, that you can also throw too many in one 30-day run. So,
and that was the same thing for college. It was 100 innings for our guys at college. It was 100 innings, and that was between spring and summer. So if we had a kid throw 70 innings in the spring, we were hoping to get 25 or 30 innings out of them in the summer, and then how you handle it in the fall is a different story with that too. I mean, Jeff,
Yep.
you're with kids the entire year now, correct?
Yeah, so that's on the academy side, and that's way, way easier to manage than the summer thing. I think this is something that gets beaten down, and we all hear it nonstop, but is really truthful. Winning tournaments over kids' health is just a terrible thing. And to Blake's thing, with everyone talking about arm health in our industry now, I mean, you're more likely to get called out now more than ever before. I mean, we had a kid, and Taylor will remember this. This is, I don't know how many years ago it was. All the years run together now. Mackenzie Gore, he was a third pick overall. He's in the Washington Nationals rotation. They won the state championship in North Carolina that year, and he threw, I believe, 75 innings on the spring. And when I saw that, I was like, well, crap, we can't start this kid this summer. So we exclusively brought him out of the bullpen. Let me promise you, I would have loved to have started him that summer because he was untouchable. But we exclusively used him out of the pen, and that was what's best for that kid. And he ended up not pitching in the fall for us as a result of all the innings that he acquired in the spring and the summer. But I just think you guys, all these youth teams, just need to keep their eye on the workload and not the trophy.
And Jordan, when does that start? Your throwing progression start? So say your season's going to start in New York, maybe April, March. When are they starting their throwing program?
So we start with a sort of off ramp in November. Then it's December, January is really all workouts that are not necessarily throwing related. We may do some light touch work and things like that. But by the time, February rolls around, they're on ramping because we've got about an 8-week window to get up to speed, some pun intended, for April. And I'll tell you, there's something that we do that, flies in the face of some people. We do not start a season, especially a spring season, with tournaments because we know there's too many innings, even with 12 pitchers, right? You've got a heavy workload coming in 3 days. So we will not do a March tournament. We typically don't even do April tournaments. We don't get started with tournaments until May. And there are folks out there, to everybody's point, want to win trophies, want to win tournaments. I understand. I'd rather see a whole bunch of guys playing college ball who have an opportunity to be there.
And we've talked about this at the convention, for Taylor and Blake, is there a way to create a database for the amount of pitches that kids have thrown? So depending if they're playing a PG tournament, a PBR tournament, USSSA tournament, that everybody knows this is how many pitches this kid has thrown.
There's definitely a way. I mean, it would be difficult with all of the different tournament providers, but then you look at, to Jeff and Jordan's point, like you need to know how many pitches they're throwing in high school and tracking that and lining that up with the spring and summer. I mean, for the high school guys and the fall, but then also on the youth side, whether it's Blake's events, our events, anybody, USSSA events, that is where there is the disconnect. We started the pitch smart stuff and tracking it early on. I mean, I think we might have been the first to really take it on. And that's why today, I mean, that's why you see a lot of the PG stuff out there is because we put it out there for the public. And the reason that we do that is we want the public to help police it. And, on the high school side, it was very quickly adopted. The good ones, it wasn't really an effect to the good programs out there and the guys that were really paying attention to it at that time. But even the ones that, weren't really paying attention to it now started paying attention, adopted it. And it is what it is at the high school level. Now the youth is a little bit different just because of, the seasonality of every weekend playing and that type of a deal. And, there's loopholes in anything that you do. And there's ways that, so for us, it's even looking at, and we're talking through some stuff here of adjusting formats and stuff like that to where it isn't as many games in a weekend. It isn't as many to win this. So even the ones that want to win, it's not as many games to win an event on that side, because, the one thing that we want to do is we want to allow the kids and teams that want to play the game of baseball. And that's where it's less isn't always better, because they want to be out there playing baseball. It does a lot of good. And that's why we're all in this game anyway. So it's just a matter of figuring out how we can help be part of the solution and not just sit here and try to win. And obviously Blake and I, we run a ton of events throughout the year in that, and get a lot of teams to play. So now it's on us to try to help be part of that solution.
And one thing I always think gets forgotten about this is we're all in different climates. So when we talk about what's going on in Indiana or New York or Florida or Texas or California, there's a lot of if somebody plays through October in California and their high school season starts in, that early winter, as we call it here, their rest period's a lot shorter. And I think I think the general public gets caught up in, oh, I didn't throw, they hear, well, we're not playing tournaments in New York until May. Whereas like that California guy may play in March, but sometimes they don't play in July or they don't play in August or whatever it looks like. So I think there needs to be more focus on the actual rest period and what the rest period looks like. When I say rest, I'm not smart enough to tell you if it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks off, but whatever that rest period needs to look like, I think there needs to be more focus on the 12-month calendar versus the seasonality of our game, because we all kind of get pigeonholed into what our weather looks like in our area.
Yeah, and Taylor and I have talked about that a lot. There are tournaments run in the wintertime, but the California kids, they're on a completely different schedule. That was very foreign to me. I'd be out there in June watching something, and they're like, yeah, we're getting ready to shut our guys down in July.
Yep.
It's very different. Rob, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool to see this group together, because this group can truly make an impact on changing, from what Taylor's talking about, formats and tournaments and events and things like that, to just an overall, I think there's discussion points on changing the pitch smart guidelines, like the 20 pitches. I think it should be a topic, certainly at the youth level. Do we just say you throw one pitch, you're not throwing the next day? I know tournament organizers would like that, because there wouldn't be 12 pitching changes in a 13U baseball game as everybody gets their 20 in, so that they can throw again on Sunday, things like that. But there's also, academies and things like that need to be a part of this process to help educate everyone. I mean, to give you an example, the two top arms in our area, high school arms in Northern Virginia, shut down in late September so they could get ready for an academy pro day, local academy pro day in the wintertime, and they're both out. They haven't pitched a high school inning yet. So just things like that become a little scary. Who's right, who's wrong, how did it happen, who knows? But I think educating parents, coaches, organizers, and academy owners is great, and that we're certainly doing that right here today.
Jordan,
Ryan, I want to
go
in
ahead.
there.
Go ahead.
When it comes to pitch smart, I mean, look, I'm out in the community a lot throughout, New York City baseball. And I have to tell you that, I mean, it comes as a shock to some people. The misunderstanding around pitch smart is actually astonishing. And I think some of the guys on this call are going to get a laugh. Some people think that if it says 80 pitches and then you need N number of days rest, it means you should throw 80 pitches. We've heard coaches on other sides say he's not up to his pitch limit, and they think that pitch limit somehow means that's his workload, like recommended workload, when of course we all know that no, that's the maximum you're going to throw. You go over that, it's another day of rest, so on and so on. I think we've actually, we use pitch smart as this very, very general guideline, but in reality, we have this list that we train all of our coaches with and families as well. Here are the telltale signs of fatigue, both, mental, emotional, and physical. What are we looking for? It's not just, did he have a 4-pitch walk after the 4th inning, right? We have this entire list of things to look for in a ball player that are indicative of fatigue. And when you see them, it's no questions asked. Don't go to the pitcher and say, hey, are you tired? We all know the answer he's going to give you, right? Of course not. I'm ready to go. I can go 12 more innings, coach, right? So for us, pitch smart's this general guideline, but we see a sign of fatigue, next. Go play first base or go sit the rest of this game out. You're not going to play third, short, or center field because, max effort throw is a max effort throw. And if it's done post fatigue, apparently the injury rate and the likelihood of an injury throwing post-fatigue skyrockets.
Jordan, I was going to ask you too, when do you start kid pitch for your young kids?
So it's interesting, we have a hybrid division for 7-year-olds. So it's kid pitch, coach pitch. And we actually love that because the kids learn to pitch in a very sort of low risk, low pressure environment, and the coach is coming in the next inning. So it's sort of this on ramp. But there in our competitive program, it's 8U baseball. You are full on kid pitch. In our club league or our rec ball, they're not going kid pitch until 9 or 10 years old. And even that for our rec ball is a hybrid. When they're 11, then it's no coaches pitching.
I mean, Jeff, you've dealt with POs. I mean, and you've dealt with dual players. How are you handling their workload? If, say, you have a dual kid, obviously POs are much easier to handle that workload. How are you handling a workload with a kid that pitches and also plays position?
Yeah, obviously that depends on if he's about to throw him on the left side of the infield or not, or if you put him in the outfield or first base. I mean, like Caden Grice was a great one that just played first base, and then you could just throw him over there. Even though he's just going to first base, we would DH him the day after. But a kid that's going on the left side of the infield, I think you have to DH that kid for 2 days, and really get the rest period before you put him back at third base.
And Rob, you've also had high-end arms too. I mean, Rob, you've had high-end arms on your teams, your high school teams. How'd you manage those guys? Because I know you've had to be careful with some of those guys.
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing conversation. Like in practices, it's managing arms and teaching kids how to be responsible to manage their own arm. Like, and making sure that your coaching staffs know as well. Like we don't need to go max effort on a backhand play in the hole for a shortstop who's a two-way guy in practice, right? So let's make sure we're managing arms constantly and making sure that it's a two-way communication between the player and the coaching staff on how they feel, what they can do. A lot of no-throw days, meaning no throw after a long toss, after they throw and warm up and go through catch play. We'll go no-throw days, things like that. Because a lot of times you have to protect kids from themselves.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, what may seem like it's common sense to us, I mean, it's like Aiden Harris is on our academy team, and he's starting to pitch. Well, he's a highly touted prospect as a hitter, and he plays third base. And we've come to find that he is really valuable to us on the mound. So he's throwing game 2. He's actually throwing today down in North Carolina. Well, he'll still take ground balls tomorrow, but to your point, Coach, he's going to drop it in the bucket. He's not going to make throws. So it's just little things like that. But just ask yourself, I mean, if a kid's throwing 75 pitches on Saturday in a tournament, yeah, he might be able to go play shortstop on Sunday and get through and manage, but why make him do that?
Yep.
And Taylor, you kind of mentioned adjusting tournament brackets. I mean, how do you do that? Do you basically just get through your pool play and then you make more brackets out of it? Is that how you limit? I mean, that's probably the only way you do that, right? Where you have 4-team flights maybe where you play a single limb at that point, and you might get one more game, you might get 2 more games, but that way you're not having to play 7 games in 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it gets real tough is the big events that they do want to go to a champion, but you get to some of these where they get to be the size, so you have to separate it. You have to make them smaller brackets, smaller divisions in there to where it doesn't take 4 games on Sunday to win on an every weekend type of event, to where, all right, you can take 2 games on Sunday because you created 2 divisions out of it. And that's where, gold, silver, bronze brackets, to where it still lets them play and be competitive, but yet,
and again, a 17U or
18U
18U kid is different than a 12U, 13U kid.
Right.
Blake, you got anything to add on that too? After Taylor, go ahead, Taylor. And then Blake.
Even on the 17, 18, I mean, we try to separate the playoffs, enough days to where it's not, playing 4 games on a day and stuff like that, because all that does is it makes the decisions a lot tougher and on that with the coaches, and putting them in a position to where they have to struggle to figure out how to do it, and also like expecting them to be pitch park compliant and that over a course of a 5-7 day event to be able to do that, and to know on Sunday, all right, you might have to get through 3 games on Sunday to do it. And that's the balancing act on the coach's side that we try as hard as we can to help accommodate that so that they can make those decisions.
Blake, go ahead.
The hard part for all of us, I mean, everybody's a business. So, we have a customer that while we're talking about, like he's mentioning, trying to protect the coach, the parent is sitting there yelling at the coach that I want to win this event, and they're not too concerned with their own kid's safety because at 12 years old, they trust their son, and my son's fine and we do everything right. So the challenge of that's one challenge. So we have 2 customers. We have a coach and a parent. The coach is usually a little more reasonable than the parent. And the second challenge is, they go from, they want to play and perfect games events. Taylor and I can't convince anybody to just play in our events, to where that schedule works out great. So they want to go play in the perfect game event, and then they want to play in the PBR event. Well, they finished on Tuesday in Taylor's event, and they're starting on Thursday, and all of a sudden, all that pitch smart that you talk about, all those things that go into effect, kind of go out the window. And that's not just PBR and PG; those are just 2 of the representations right now. They could go to the dynamic event and throw on a Monday and literally be rolling into another place the next day. So, and the other issue is we have weather that jams everything up because we owe it to our customer to play a certain number of games. And, we get called on the other side. If we don't make up those games, we have an upset customer. And so weather really jams us up on those type of decisions. So we're trying to get as close as we can to the game guarantee throughout so they can plan a little better. Maybe it is a 5-game guarantee, so they know how, or 6 or 7. So they know how many games they're going to play in that period of time. And just manage the format. So maybe you get eliminated earlier in the event, but you play that number of games. How can we do that to better protect them and better allow coaches to plan? And then we've gone with a lot of the showcase formats where it's 5 games. And you play 5 games and you know what the 5 games are. It allows us to eliminate some of the rules. I tell coaches all the time in that event, we have 1 at each one of our facilities. Hey, if you want to let your hitter hit 4 times because the college is here, run them up there 4 different times because we're not keeping wins, losses. And some guys, they can't play that every weekend, but they really enjoy that when they're there for that one kind of occurrence. The kids just don't get as excited. Other than that, they like to play to win too. So sometimes they feel that scrimmage game kind of format. But that's one way we've helped to protect them because it's a lot more scripted. Coaches don't feel as panicked to make bad decisions.
Rob, go ahead.
And even to follow up on that, Ryan,
Taylor.
Blake, on on the team side of it, if you're thinking that you have a chance to make it through the bracket play and get all the way to the championship game, like you're holding pitching back for that. And if you get upset at some point during the bracket play, you have parents and players that have spent money to stay at that event overnight and for several days. And Jeff and Jordan, I'd like to see here, how do you manage that to where that you end up with a happy customer, like a happy parent, a happy player that at the end of the day also needs to throw in front of people.
Yeah, so I'll use Jupiter as an example. I always email you guys ahead of time and I say, hey, if I get eliminated, will you give me up to 2 exhibition games on Monday? And you always say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I email my parents and I say, you do not fly out of Jupiter, Florida until after 5 o'clock on Monday. That's whether we are in the playoffs or not. I was like, because our staff knows that we are staying to execute 2 exhibition games on Monday to get those kids innings, to your point. Another thing we do is if the event starts on Thursday, we'll have an exhibition game on Wednesday. And a lot of guys will throw bullpens, but a lot of guys will throw like 1 to 2 inning outings. They're off the books. They don't count against the event, but there's scouts everywhere. They get a competitive outing with no pressure because the result doesn't really matter. And if they only throw 2 innings or sometimes even 1 inning, some of these guys are throwing 15 pitches. On Wednesday, you can flip them to Saturday, completely safe, Friday even. So that's how we combat it. But unfortunately, some people will say, to your point, they'll get down there and they'll get eliminated on Sunday. You guys are off for an exhibition games on Monday. They're like, nope, we're out of here. And then that kid's looking for a place to throw.
Well, it takes a lot of detailed planning on your part to be able to plan that out well in advance that not everybody does. And that's, I think, where it gets a lot of bad publicity too from parents of like, oh, we went all the way down there and spent all that money and I threw two innings, you know.
And the other side of it is if you want to go down there and win, we all do, but to safely win, you need a lot of arms. Like, I'm sure teams have won, and they probably looked at it afterwards and they're like, man, we really stretched so-and-so.
Well, and you got to
they did it against the kids' best interest.
Yep.
Yeah, Ryan, if I could jump in, I think, part of this is market expectations, right? As Blake talked about earlier, it's what the coaches and parents are looking for. Like, we all have to be in this together, whether it's dynamic, PG, U-Trip, PBR, as we make these rules changes or as we change formats within tournaments and events, because what's going to happen if we try to do the right thing in X company in terms of number of games, and as Taylor talked about, not trying to play 4 games in bracket play on a Sunday, people, the market, they're going to go somewhere else if they're offering that, because I can go play 6 games in 2 days. Like, the market wants all these games, especially if they're traveling. So how do we manage, that desire with safety and arm care desires is a big piece of this. And I think a part of that is just trying to do things, again, under Blake's subcommittee that we're starting up, trying to do things the right way all together so that we're all creating these. I think, the 4-team, we do a lot of local mini tournaments and we do exactly, Ryan, what you talked about. You go into a 4-team bracket, 1 through 4, 5 through 8. And usually we only have like 20 teams anyway. So that they're not playing more than 2 games on a Sunday, but that's a local event. If somebody's traveling to go play dynamic PBR perfect game, they want as many games as they can get, because they're spending money on hotels and
this
gas.
Is more a parent thing than a player thing, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a player, I don't want to play 6 games in 2 days.
Right.
I did it one time until I got to high school. I did it one time for Little League. We had to win 3 games, but it was 18 innings. I did it one time. And
what it does is it allows for you, I mean, you just want to talk about the purity of the game. And Taylor, you've probably seen this, like that first game, they're up 8-0, and all of a sudden they're playing for those last 2 runs, and those guys are stealing so they can turn that 18-inning day into a 12-inning day or whatever. And you get more fights, and it's just not good all around. So,
and speaking of that, can we get into umpire topics a little bit? Taylor, I think you guys have done a good job with that, with trying to develop relationships with the umpires and parents. Tim Gordell's done stuff with you guys, and I think he does a tremendous job. He spoke at the convention in Chicago to our high school youth and travel coaches, did a tremendous job. But I think you're trying to head that off. I don't think it ever gets fixed, but can you talk about umpires' relationships?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in anybody that runs events or even anybody that coaches in events, you can see the direction that it's going right now with, the youth and travel umpires, even the high school umpires at this point, because they're all the same guys that, depending on the season. But that relationship there between umpire, coach, and parent especially has deteriorated significantly over time. And it's getting to the point now that every umpire that you see out there, for the most part, are older umpires right now. And they're the ones that are, they have, maybe another 3 to 5 years of umpiring left, and then they're going to be retired because they're going to be too old to umpire. But what you're not seeing is a lot of younger generation umpires coming into it, and that's one of the things that we looked at. Is a big reason for that is all of these players that are out there playing right now, they all are identifying that relationship between that umpire that they're playing in the game with, and the way that communication is going between coach and umpire and parent and umpire And then they're going home with that parent that was irate with it. Like, who's going to want to be an umpire? Like baseball, they're only going to be able to play baseball for so long. And to stay in the game, the umpire is a great way to stay in the game, especially if you're knowledgeable about it. But who's going to want to be that guy that gets yelled at and gets ridiculed? So, for us, it's always trying to help fix that problem, not allow that to go as far as it goes in a lot of situations. And we're not perfect, just like anybody, like as far as that goes. But then also, how do we get more young people involved in umpiring? And that's where, and Tim's done a good job with it. Andrew Tumlin's done a good job with it for us as far as clinics and camps and getting them involved at the younger ages. And unfortunately, the 9 through 12U is worse than the older guys as far as that relationship and the way that it's being treated out there. So, talent wise and slowing the game down where these young umpires need to really learn and get the experience is also, unfortunately, the area that they're getting the most ridiculed and that side of it. So finding that balance there, trying to get them in with the local travel teams as they're scrimmaging and as they're doing stuff to where they can get on field action without it being in a highly competitive environment is where it's at. But that's definitely a big issue. And and Blake can attest to this too, is like we have more games and more events going on than we have umpires that are available and that are wanting to do it. And you just see that generational gap of there's only so many years left of some of these guys that are out there umpiring. And to be honest with you, some of them are probably past their prime on even being out there, but they're out there out of necessity.
And Blake, you guys have done a good job at Grand Park. When I was over there for some of the junior college and travel events, you guys were using it as training for umpires.
Yeah. So we've stood pretty firm at Grand Park. Sometimes we catch flack for it, but we try and use all of our summer stuff as training. We do a 2-man camp. We do a 3-man camp. Alex Candelas and United Umpires have been really good to work with and kind of helping set up a training ground for colleges. We actually just infiltrated our high school and we're offering a curriculum. It's a class now. We're trying to get scalability into that so we can get into more, so we've gotten 5 high schools we're up to, I believe now, that are starting to actually teach umpiring. And so we're able to use that to get guys. The education of how much money they can make in the summer is been the biggest win for us, and also the challenge, and then also supporting them. The challenge we have is being able to support those young guys on the field, because the expectation, like, they can't learn every single rule. Like, our rule book is entirely too thick. They cannot understand all those rules at a 9U game, and things are going to come up. And making sure that both coaches understand, like, this kid is going to need our support, and figuring out how to support that kid when those things happen so that it doesn't lead to a fight on a 17-year-old kid. And we have a lot of really good coaches that appreciate and love the fact that there's a 16-year-old doing their 9-year-old games. But there's still those bad apples, and it takes one bad apple to get that 16-year-old completely out of the game. So as a community, as a baseball community, when you see those younger guys, I think we have to embrace that, support them, help them, swallow our pride a little bit when we see them, because it's their first job. And if it's your son, like, my kid's one of these guys that's umpiring now, so he's going out and umpiring these games, so I get to learn. But like, he comes home and the stories are amazing that he hears and sees, and he wants to be good. He just doesn't know the rule book and all the rules. He knows the basic rules, but when something crazy comes up, and guess what? Those 9U games always have the crazy things. It's impossible for him to get all those right and understand it. And they say he gets paid enough, and that's just not the case. Like, nobody gets paid enough to know, 367 pages of rule book and memorize it for the one time it's going to happen in their career.
And that's where we have to reframe it as it used to be parents, umpires, coaches. You're in service of the players. You're providing a service for them to have an enjoyable experience on the baseball field. And that's where we need to reframe that needs to be all three: parents, coaches, umpires. You're providing a service for the players on the field to allow them to have an enjoyable experience, to hopefully want to keep playing, hopefully want to give back to the game. Where if we can reframe it to that, you'll start to see people umpire Umpire
Right.
don't come back.
The other thing, the video kills us. These guys all have cameras in their pocket. They're posting it. And then everybody wants to tag along and celebrate that's if you watch like some of these videos that get posted, it's like a 13-0 game. And the opposing coach is like, just get me off the field. That's why that fastball is being called in the right-handed batter's box. So you don't get the whole story from that video, and umpires are getting really defensive on those. And I don't blame them. So I would just urge parents not to join in on that that part of the game.
What questions do you guys have for each other? I mean, you guys are boots on the ground. I'm just sitting here in the ABCA office riding your guys' coattails. But what questions do you have for each other that need to be addressed?
Brian, I
ahead,
just a real quick one on umpiring, because we come at it from a different approach. For us, our coaches, part of the coaches training manual for us is there's absolutely never a time where it's appropriate to argue ball strike, safe or out, or any call on the field other than a rules check, and it's got to be done appropriately. We have an entire training piece on how to approach an umpire respectfully, how to ask to, what the concern of the rule is, or to ask if it's a two-man crew or more, can you ask your partner, I think he had a better angle on that call, but under no circumstances are we allowed to argue balls and strikes, safe or out, for any reason, under any circumstance. And we actually train the parents to do the same thing, that there's no time where a parent should ever address or criticize an umpire for any reason. The coach don't even go to the coach to say, I think you should do this. Don't address it. We actually, we ask, but it's a requirement. Our parents are not allowed behind backstops at baseball games. So there's never even an opportunity for those interactions. And, one time in 15 years, we had post-game and game ended on a bad call, and a dad went on the field to give the umpire time. And we before we even had the opportunity to tell the dad, well, you're probably not welcome at games anymore. We're going to say it nicely. You understand that's not okay. He reached out to us to say, I was inappropriate. Please know that it will never happen again. And we took that at its word, and it worked out. So we don't even allow that to come across the pike.
Man, you would fire me immediately. Not arguing balls and strikes, man. Oh,
I will say
I don't even think
I'd
get my first paycheck from you.
We do allow for, I will tell you, when I used to be on field, there was always friendly banter between innings. Like I have some fun memories of, this got to be 10 years ago, where by the third or fourth inning, I'd walk out onto a baseball field and chat with a base ump, be like, hey, the score is 7-0. He's like, no, I don't think so. I was like, no, you got 7. My team's got nothing. I think we need to fix that. We just get a laugh out of it because, hey, I'm not worried, right? It'll all work out. I don't think anything's going on wrong. And for, at the time, $40 to stand out here for 2 hours in the heat, I'm not worried.
Right.
No
Yeah, jumping in and closing the loop on the umpire, what Taylor was talking about earlier. I mean, it's no different than players, right? We're trying to recruit umpires and we're trying to retain umpires. And the recruiting and the retention of umpires is a critical piece of this game. And again, back to Blake's subcommittee, I think this is something that we can work on. As Taylor said earlier, the younger the teams are, the way more problems there are with umpires. I just dealt with a parent ejection in our league. If a parent gets ejected, the player and the parent go for 8 days. Player has to go with them, which is not something that we love to do, but it's the only way that parents are going to sort of wise up to how they need to act. And I think we can share ideas and concepts. I love some of the stuff Jordan just talked about. And that's what can come out of these ABCA committees and subcommittees. And is just how do you do things with dynamic, with PBR, with perfect game, with Empire Baseball. It's sharing those ideas can really affect the game in a positive way, and even going down to recruiting and retaining umpires and players and coaches.
Well, and one of those things I would love to hear the opinion of you guys on here, and that we battle with a lot, and I think everybody does, is there's this big concentration on arm care and doing what's right for the player health wise, which we're all on board with. But then there's also the whole thing of growing the game and getting more kids involved with baseball, getting kids to stay in baseball longer, because it does have this perception of a boring game, especially at the youth levels. I mean, you might play in the outfield and never get a ball hit to you, but then the rules and everything that we're trying to put in place with the pitching, it just makes the game more boring for the rest of the guys out on the field. And what we run into with some of these young ages is because of the pitch smart, they'll throw a kid 15 pitches, they'll throw 6 of those guys in a row so that they can come back and throw later in the weekend. Well, their Friday game is 3 innings and it's an hour and 45 minutes long because there's so many pitching changes. That's not growing the game and making it more fun for those 9 to 12-year-old kids that are trying to play. So it's that balance. And I'd love to hear if there's, the rest of you guys' thoughts on it. Like, how do we still make this thing fun and try to grow the game to where those kids that are 9 years old don't get so bored that they quit baseball at 9 because
we talked about it on the youth committee one. We did talk about some ways to clean that up where it's a modified coach pitch, kid pitch.
Yeah.
With David Klein with speedball, there's some modifications that there are some youth leagues out there that are doing to make it more enjoyable for kids to play with modified fields, modified only 6 on field. Like there's some good things that came out of that youth committee one as far as making it more enjoyable for them. But we all saw the Aspen research numbers. It's not the young kids' participation because we're right up there with basketball. It's once they get to the big field. So, yeah. and that's the transition period that we need to be concerned with, is making it enjoyable for them when they do actually get to 60, 90, and how do we make that more enjoyable for them? Because that's where we see the drop-off, as the game gets really hard when it gets to 60, 90. So how do we help them transition to be able to compete on the big field as well?
Do you think that's the game gets hard, or do you think that's the succession of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? I mean, those years are the boring years of the game, right? Like, so when they get to 14, like, have they already made up their mind? Coaching a group all the way through, like, those kids had already made up their mind that they wanted to play basketball, and they knew going into 14, they knew this was their last year on a baseball diamond. So, like, I always wonder if it's because they didn't have success or if it's more because they are bored at 9, 10, 11, 12. And basketball is more fun for them. And that's Indiana. We're basketball, obviously.
I think a big part of this is what drives kids out of our game is walks, errors, timing, and failure, right? And when I say timing, the problem with 13U baseball is it becomes almost like Double-A Little League again, which is that first year player pitch, because there's a lot more walks and errors because of the bigger field. Especially kids that jump from 60 all the way to 90, I know a lot play 70 in between, things like that. So how do we keep games moving, and how do we minimize walks and errors? Obviously errors is a tough one. Walks and pitching changes is a big part of that timing that Taylor talked about. I think we're going to toy with in our small events. You throw one pitch, I think I touched on it earlier, you're not eligible the next day. So change pitch smart rules. You throw a pitch Saturday, you're not throwing Sunday. Again, these aren't big time events where people are flying in or driving in or anything like that. So it's a little bit easier for us to do that than others, but it's excruciating watching coaches just, like Taylor said, throw a kid 15, throw another kid 15, throw a kid 19. And you have 6 pitching changes and you play 3 innings in your time limit. We're also toying with, no new inning, 120. We did a little small event a couple weeks ago, and the coaches loved it. And they played 3 games in a day, but they were like 4 or 5 inning games. And what happens when you shrink the time limits to there, everybody speeds things up between innings. We told our umpires, let's keep things moving, things like that. So I think it's toying with new ideas and concepts to try to help with timing, errors, walks, those types of things.
Well, we had talked about that too with the youth committee. Okay, when do you close a base off? Like for me, I think leads and steals start way too soon. I think advancing on overthrows starts way too soon. I think we need to, again, allow kids to turn double plays. So for me, I think we're starting leads and steals too soon. I think we're asking a young pitcher to worry about a guy taking a lead much rather than just pitching. I think we're pushing that. Yeah, I think we're putting too much on kids' plates to ask them to play the adult style of baseball too soon, rather than just focus on what's important, and that's fielding the ball, throwing the ball, making plays. Because the game we're making the game too fast for young kids with some of the gameplay portion of that. You guys have anything to add on that?
I love your baseball purist. I tried it.
I know. Well, and that's why I'm asking, because
it.
you guys are running these tournaments, so you're seeing it firsthand. I don't get to see that. You guys are seeing the blowback on that.
I started Grand Park, and I had 3 absolutes. We're not going to steal, and we're not going to do leadoffs at 9U. We're not going to have time limits, and we're not going to have tie baseball. We're not going to have any ties. All 3 of those rules have since been squashed. And I had no 9U show up. The first game that was 4 hours long, I had the 8 teams that still had to play screaming at me. And the first extra inning game that went 14 innings, and that team was out of pitching for their next 2 games. So I quickly learned that those rules were not going to work from a purist standpoint. So I agree with you, Ryan. I'm all in. But we're going to have to, if we want to get rid of the steals and the leadoffs, we're going to have to do it as an industry. It's not going to be one. It's not going to be one group that decides that.
And that's one of my question is, do we ever get to a point where we can streamline, if I'm playing in an 8U tournament, no matter what tournament I'm playing in, these are the rules that you play by. A 9U tournament, no matter who's the provider is, these are the rules that you play. Can we get to that point? I would like to see us get to that point. I don't know if we ever get to that point. It's going to take a lot of work, but I would like to see that. Again, because I think it makes it easier for everybody. If it's an 11U tournament, these are the rules that you play by.
So I'll tell you,
Taylor,
Brian,
go ahead.
What made it interesting for us is when there's a governing body, and not a national governing body, but any, we're playing federation rules. Hey, we're playing youth rules, right? Whatever it is. If there were a set of rules that were ABCA rules, or insert body here, then an organization, a travel organization, can say, hey, we play by ABCA rules. It's 8U this, it's 9U this, it's 10U this, right? And I think that makes it very, very easy where the teams who are signing up for a league are excited that this isn't some league gone rogue who's decided, oh, we're going to do this at 8U, this at 9U. No, this is what's done for some people nationally. And I think having that as a body of rules that are contained, that are understandable, that are out there, that are not unique to one league, would go a long way. The other thing, and Taylor, this is right at you. I'll tell you, the running joke around here is, especially, in our sort of small part of the country here, is undersized 12-year-olds on a 60-90 field, right, in their 12 to 13 season is a complete disaster for of baseball, right? So for 15 years, I'm hearing people say, well, you got to go play 60-90 when you're fall 12U or, transition to 13, so you're ready for the big field. I actually think that's the silliest conversation. Why don't we just put my 5-year-old daughter on 60-90? She'll be 10 times as ready. Instead, we do need some standardized, hey, 54-80. I think that's the geometry-ish.
Yeah.
Say 12U, even 13U transition, maybe 90-foot diamond. Hey, if you want advanced 13U, go play 60-90. If you want intermediate, it's 54-80, because the jump from 51-75 to 60-90, that's a miserable
I couldn't get the ball down. I caught all the way until I got to Pony League, and then I had to catch in Pony League. I could not get the ball to second base on throws down. Could not.
I think
that's how I knew when I got to high school I was probably going to have to make a position change.
And that's the thing, too, just to follow up on Jordan there real quick, where you run into issues with all this transition stuff. And Ryan, that's even going to the big field, is the availability of big fields that are not being tied up by high school teams, by college. Like it's hard, especially if you're in a competitive area, to get a team onto a 60-90 high school size field to practice, to a scrimmage. To that, if you don't have the connections, you're not getting. It's not like the smaller fields where every city has, a quad or something to go out there to get on.
Yep.
And then to follow up on Jordan's point too, is in the areas that there are the 54-80 fields that we could get on, we do, like at 13U, we'll run a 54-80 and we'll run a 60-90, because you're 100% right. Like there's that 13-year-old age division. It's a drastic change between the major kids and the kids that can handle it and the other ones, because even the major ones on a 60-90 field, that's some boring baseball to watch. I mean, that is a really tough game if you can't if you don't have those major teams that can compete on that level. So we do try it, but fortunately 5480 fields are hard to come by as well. Like they're that in between that you don't have the pegs far enough back. Like you got to have temp mounds. So there's a lot more that goes into it to create a 5480 field compared to the other ones.
Jeff,
I mean,
did you
Ryan,
have
the other
Jordan.
issue is how you teach the game at the youth level. Because look, our specialty is the younger ages. Number one, hey, let's go back to Devin. Skills that scale are the key. If you're teaching kids just throw strikes and just make contact, when they get up to 13, they're not playing baseball anymore. They might as well quit. They're better off quitting baseball because they can't play anymore, right? They can't succeed at that level. Can't hit the ball out of the infield. Can't reach home plate. So just throw strikes. Even the ball's floating in from
Right.
50 feet and they think they're successful. They're successful for another 8 weeks and that's the end of their baseball career. The other piece is the way the game is taught is, hey, let's take ground balls, let's swing, let's throw. But nobody's teaching, and I don't say nobody, that's not fair. But the teach has to be what do 9 players at 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, what do 9 players need to do on every play? On a ground ball to the second baseman, what does your left fielder need to be doing? And that has to be a bigger component of the teach because then playing left field is not boring. Your
Right.
ass is over in left center field, backing up the next throw or base hit to right. You're moving over to back up the throw to second. And the one time out of 50 that there's an overthrow and you're in the right place, you're never going to let it happen again where you're not there because you're a hero for being in a backup. And that's a huge component of our teach from age 7 to 12, getting them ready to go play real baseball, where you have to be in position. We call it 9x9 or 81. We hit 9 balls with everybody in a position, and everybody has to go to the right position, and then you rotate positions, and you do it 9 times. So there's 81 plays made in that practice, and it's 9, and then you rotate 9, you rotate 9, you rotate. So you learn every position on the field and where you need to be at all times. So that's a huge teach at the young level that makes the game less boring.
We talked about it in the youth camp. When I run youth camps for Scott Bankhead here in town, they rotate after every batter. So the defense rotates after every batter.
That's wild.
And
Yep.
and honestly, time them on and off they got points for getting on and off the field in a certain amount of time. And we didn't play runs because, obviously it's everybody hits with a runner at first base or everybody hits with first and second. They got points for bases and took out runs. And obviously if you're making errors, that cleans that part of it up too, because a team knows if I make plays here, it keeps them from touching the next base. That's a way to gamify that a little bit more. We're not worrying about runs, but also rotating defenders after every hitter. Makes it way more fun.
Hey,
Go
I
ahead,
know
Jeff.
I know this thing's getting long-winded, and I'm actually asking a question, Jordan, and you're probably gonna be like, "Are you serious?" And I'm asking it because I really don't know. I inherit Corbin Carroll's and Anthony Volpe's in the 1st of June, and more or less pencil in a lineup, hit them some ground balls, and we'll chuck them some BP and put them in competitive situations, and we go play. We're not developing those players, right? You're in there developing your players. So, like, what do you see? You said you were 4 to 18.
So
right?
our youngest, our team just launched a program for 18 months to 24 months. So
Oh my God.
I'm not involved in that program, but
Well, my 4-year-old won't put down Spider-Man, so I can't even. So, I'm just asking, and I'm being serious, and I think I might know the answer. Are there 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds that you see in your building that you're like, that kid has no shot? But then you look up one day and they're 15 and you're like, that kid can freaking play.
you ready to fall on the floor right now?
I mean, I'm curious, like, because I see, because we have a building here in town now, and I'm seeing that more where I'm looking at 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, but my own 6-year-old. I mean, I'm out at practice yesterday, and there was one kid where it was T-ball. There was one kid that was launching balls. He was the best player on the field by far. And I was like, man, that kid's going to be really good one day. And then one of the dads was like, you might be surprised. You might look up one day and he might be 14 and not playing. And there might be some kid over there that's terrible that he's the best player in the area one day. So, let me answer.
We had a kid who was 7 years old, who undersized kid. He's now a big kid. He finally grew. 7 years old at 7U. He made our 10U travel team as a second baseman and a relief pitcher. right? The kid was magic on a baseball field from age 4. He is no longer playing baseball. He's playing high school basketball. Whether or not he's going to play college basketball, I don't know, right? Flip side of that story, and Taylor, I'm sure he's come through your ranks. Got a kid who's a senior at Dartmouth, chucking 94 right now, 3,000 RPM breaking stuff, who at 10, 11 years old was the laughing stock of our travel program, had no business on a baseball field. He got the SAT score we expected him to get, a 1580. He was standing there with the hat over his ears, had no business on a baseball. I'm zero. He's now in our Hall of Fame. I'm assuming he's going to get drafted. He's going to Maryland for his 5th year of eligibility next year to pitch there. And the kid is he's got some of the best stuff we've ever seen in 15 years, right? Our running joke is that he's the only human being to ever have an over 1,500 SAT score, and his spin rate on his breaking stuff is 2 times his SAT. And at 10, 11 years old, this kid had zero business putting on a jersey. And one day came to say, "Hey, coach, can you teach me a curveball?" And I almost laughed at him. I'm like, sure. And look at him now. So, yeah,
Jeff,
there's no
the
doubt.
best pitcher in the Big Ten right now would not have been able to pitch for you in high school on your teams. He's 84 to 85 as a sophomore. Could spin it a little bit. Great command, but Brett Sears would have never been able to pitch for the Canes.
I mean, and listen, we've cut plenty of kids from our travel program at 9, 10 years old. And I can't go to parties because, parents all hate me because their kid got cut by our travel program 4 years ago. They won't talk to me anymore. And I got news for you. There's some of they're doing a great job in high school baseball right now. They weren't that good at 9. You only got 12 spots on a team. Sorry, your kid. This is not the right fit for your son. And the kid went on to great things, either with us or without us. So
yeah,
we see it all the time.
4 or 5 years old. Go either way.
I mean, not quite that, not that young is what you're talking about, Jordan, but like the 13 and 14-year-old kid that dominates, he's 6 foot, 170 pounds as a 14-year-old, but unfortunately he's already got facial hair in that. And then all of a sudden he turns to 16 and he's 6 foot still and, 210 pounds, and he's not a top 5 player on the field. That skinny little kid that finally developed is now the prospect. And this kid is just, he matured early and was bigger, stronger than everybody else on the field at 13 years old, and he just peaked early.
Yep.
So
cool. That's cool stuff.
Rob, you want to tie this up? You guys want to go around the horn here and tie this thing up here?
Yeah, I think what's so neat about this conversation and what we do within the ABCA and the summit and everything else, just this last hour and a half. I mean, you're talking about some of the most important people in baseball here on this call with Jeff and Taylor and Blake and Jordan, and certainly you, Ryan, as well, and people that can make changes, make a difference. And I think it's our responsibility to the game to bring in others to make those changes so that the market, ultimately, we're all on the same page. We're working together, whether it be arm care, whether it be rules, guidelines, recruiting and retention of players, coaches, or umpires. It's just exciting. The thing with it is, just like all these changes, it's hard, right? It's going to be hard because we're all so caught up in what we're doing, whether it be NVTBL or Canes or Dynamic or Perfect Game or Empire or PBR. But we have people here who are willing to give back to the game to make a bigger impact at the 30,000 foot level, if you will, and bring in others to do the same. So it's exciting, and I look forward to what we're going to do over the next 6 to 12 months.
Anybody else got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think, look, the crux of Rob, I love what you just said. I mean, you've got some of the strongest, certainly strongest personalities in the industry, and I think all for good. And every one of us, over the last couple of years, has shared this very open-minded approach, an open book and transparent approach to not necessarily what we do and how we do it, because it's not right for everybody, right? The way Taylor does this, not necessarily the way I do that. But the fact that from everyone on this call and everybody in the summit to be so open and sharing with everything we've got in terms of our approach, our philosophy, down to the individual drills and how we think about things, I think there's one common thread that would probably have a positive impact on everybody in the industry, which is if youth development and enjoyment of the game was more of a focus for people. And I think some people think that's hokey. They think that's just crap, right? It's, well, you just got to win games because the more you win, the better people will perceive you and more people will sign up. I think that's a short-term game because the minute you lose games, you're no longer interesting, right? We are very clear and communicative about the fact that we are looking to create long-term healthy athletes. They're going to play baseball beyond the time that they think that they can play baseball. We want to make their dreams come true and have them better than they think they can be. And winning for us is a long-term goal, right? It comes as the result of healthy, enjoyable, athletic baseball development at every age, whether the kid's 4, 8, 12, 16, whatever it is. So the real win for us is not the W's and L's today, but how many kids, like our retention rate at those levels is high because the kids are having a great experience and not just as happy losers, right? That's not fun for anybody. Let's be honest. We're developing, we're having a great baseball experience. We're not leaving baseball because this is fun. And as Devin always says, fun is good. So, I think if we shine a light on long-term athletic development, player development, individual player development being a long-term win, as opposed to the short-term wins and trophies. Look, people who have open ears will listen. Other people poo-poo, and that's okay. I think the guys playing the long-term game are rising to the top three. I mean, it's true of any industry, not just ours. But I think the guys who play that long game will succeed for the long run.
And I appreciate your guys' time. You guys are really busy, really, really busy. And so for you guys to jump on here right now and take time out of your day in the middle of the week, because when you got meetings going on left and right, I appreciate your time. And another reason to look forward to the convention is we're adding the travel hot stove, whatever that's going to look like. It'll be the Saturday after the youth stage finishes. That's another reason for people to get to the convention because we're continuing to add more and more things to help the game at all levels, but it's another good thing we're going to add to the convention this year. And Jordan, you were big on that, so I appreciate you on that, my friend.
Happy to be a part of it.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.